Hello again, ladies and gents, and welcome back to another awesome episode of the AJ Roberts Show with the London Times. Now, many of you will know that I've been focusing a lot on Australia at the moment. It is the place of topic. There is some horrible scenes going on all across the country, from Queensland to Victoria, New South Wales, and even more recently, as we've just seen in the Northern Territory, where the Premier has announced that cases of the coronavirus, and I say cases lightly, with a fraudulent PCR test in a tropical state where the temperature is pretty warm, meaning that very unlikely that coronaviruses are going to survive in those kind of climates. Cases are now being taken to quarantine camps. That's where we're at, ladies and gents. It's gone from 3 weeks to flatten the curve to taking people to quarantine camps to be pretty much mandatory injected with coronavirus vaccines. Like, it is terrible. Today we are joined by Mrs. Jane Dempsey, all the way from Victoria. Jane's a teacher. She's in her first year and has unfortunately been made to stop teaching already in such a short space of time after only newly qualifying. Jane spent the last year of her studies having to do it all from home because of harsh lockdowns that were in Victoria and have been ever since. Jane, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Hi, AJ.
So, I mean, let's get into the start of it. Like you said, you went into teaching late on in your career. Obviously, was it something that you always sort of dreamed on doing?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a teacher, but traveled a lot, then had my own children. And it wasn't until my son was about 12, my daughter was 15, I felt that they were independent enough to be self-managed and I could go back to uni and start doing what I really wanted to do.
Fantastic.
So that was a 4-year degree.
Yeah, which is often the case, isn't it, for so many mums and wives out there. I know it's exactly the same for my wife. She's studying occupational therapy at a university right now, in her mid-30s. Right. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you've done 3 years of the degree in sort of normal pace settings. And then the last year of your degree was, boom, you're now working from home because of harsh lockdowns. What was that like?
Yeah. Well, that was really isolating. And in fact, a lot of students actually dropped out because they just couldn't cope with doing it all on your own without any peer support, really. We also had all of our placements cancelled. So nobody got experience of actual teaching in the classroom, which is really, really important in your last year of uni.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
By the time I got my job, it was really just thrown into the deep end.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we were just talking about before, I was casting my mind back to obviously being a primary school kid, and you're a bit of a Jack the Lad and that. I mean, like you said, those 6 weeks experience kind of gives you a bit of an idea of what you've trained for, but also what to maybe expect. And like, as a little kid, and that all you want to do is like try and wind the supply teacher up, and they all missed out. By throwing crayons at them and stuff. Yeah.
The whole year's been challenging.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, you're trying to, I know what it's like here, but you're trying to get through your studies, whilst understanding what you've worked so hard for up until this point, whilst being isolated and working from your own home, and then still running the home as well because you're at home. And people often just forget that, and that's causes the stress. That's what causes the mental health issues. And would you say because of that, it's it made you quite thick-skinned?
Yeah, I've always been pretty resilient and focused. So the studies for me, because we had such strict lockdowns here and we literally couldn't leave our homes other than to go to the supermarket, it kept me busy, and I love studying if it's something that I'm really interested in. So I just put everything into that, and I really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. And what would you say is the key characteristics you found that was important to you, into why you wanted to get into teaching?
I think seeing my own children go through some struggles at school, and realizing that having a good teacher can make all the difference to a child. And I'm really interested in obviously the academic side and doing the best for all students so that they can make as much growth and progress as they can academically. But for me, I think it's more about the well-being,
Yeah.
the social side of school, and happiness.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had that to give to children, to
Mm.
make them feel safe and secure and welcome and included at school. So that's
Absolutely.
been my big focus. And
Yeah.
establishing that rapport with the kids, but also with their families, because I teach grade 1, so that's the second year of school.
Yeah.
So they're still very little, and learning about independence. And I think that was the gift that I wanted to bring to teaching, was to develop really good, strong rapport with my students.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. Absolutely love that. And it's I'm not saying it's something that's been missing, but I think it just that sort of ethos in in yourself, delivering that to the children, it's so vital. And moving forward, I hope that teachers around the world have a similar ethos to that, because there's so many children out there that have been really harshly affected all over the world from lockdowns. Some countries, the poor countries, they're not even going to school at all, not even learning. They don't have that ability to be able to learn from home and have all these different sort of like learning softwares and stuff like that to be able to sit there and sort of get it all done during lockdowns and that, so it's vitally important. Absolutely. So just run us through, obviously, that first year of yours of teaching then. So you've done this degree, you qualified, you started teaching at your new schools, your dreams starting to be fulfilled. What was that like at the beginning?
So the school year runs differently here. We start around about the end of January, beginning of February. That's the beginning of our school year. And because it's my first year of teaching, I'm a graduate teacher. So I did get extra support this year in terms of having another teacher to relieve me for some lessons, so that I had extra time to work with my mentor teacher. And she's been a great support through the year. So you're kind of learning as you go, because I didn't get to have that 6-week placement in my final year at uni. So it was all the behavior management strategies that were really new to me. But, I had a lot of support. The school that I've worked in has been amazing, and I've been so grateful to be working there with such wonderful colleagues. And I was so happy to have such a fantastic school to be working in, especially in my first year, because not all my friends at uni have had the same experience that I've had.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. We've also had 4 months of lockdown this year alone. And that's when we had to revert to online teaching and learning. And that was a whole new ball game. I had to learn how to operate remotely and hold 6 Zooms a day with my students. So it was very much tied to your laptop all day long. But for me, that was also about keeping my students' morale up, making sure that they were interacting with their peers, playing lots of games with them, reading them stories. Because there was a long time during lockdown, that children weren't even allowed to go to the parks here. The playgrounds were shut down for fear of COVID. I mean, these poor little kids were stuck at home and literally couldn't even go for a walk to the playground. So, you had to be quite inventive as a teacher to create lessons that would get them outside in the garden and get them active and do yoga with them and get them talking to their friends and playing interactive games that actually work on Zoom. So it was, a very challenging year. And then at the end of that was, I think, the 25th of October was when schools started to go back. So our lockdowns were ending around that time, and schools gradually staggered back. It was 2 days a week to begin with at school, 3 days online. They did that for about 3 weeks, and they've been back at school properly for a couple of weeks now, but I've not been there.
Okay. And obviously that's a ridiculous amount of time to be away from school, and like you're saying, even parks closed and stuff like that. And as I reported many times before, ladies and gents, the sheer difference in so-called cases, and bearing in mind cases do not mean infections and never have done, was ridiculously low in Australia alone. And they were locking everybody down for such a minute number of cases, weren't they? Because just as it is here in UK, in Australia and other countries around the world, obviously it was degraded to a sort of a disease which was totally on par with flu. And that's what happened here in the UK in March 2020. It was degraded to Cat 4 or something like that, I think it is. And then 6 days later, we find ourselves in lockdown. And it's, unlawfully, it just didn't even pass through Parliament. There was no real discussion. And then the emergency laws were brought in, and the Coronavirus Act was brought in, which has just been rolled over every 6 months without any, and more recently without any debate. Obviously, I look around myself every day and ask myself, where's this emergency? Just like many other people have. Now, obviously, because of all the ridiculousness of these mandates and these, well, they're not even laws, are they, that they bring in, shutting playgrounds and go into the measures that they have done, the indoctrination on people, the brainwashing, the sheer programming of society. I mean, blimey, they've done a good job, fair play. But when did the penny kind of drop for you that, from the start of all this, that something wasn't right?
Well, I knew that once, you see, we got the vaccine rollout later here than you have in the UK. It started in February, but that was only for elderly people, vulnerable people. Teachers were allowed to get the vaccine from July, and we were offered this at school, and we were strongly encouraged to take the vaccine. At that time, I spoke to my assistant principal and told her that I would not be taking the vaccine. I had a previous health scare 2 years ago. I had a brain aneurysm, and it was just out of the blue, perfectly healthy otherwise, but I had to have emergency brain surgery and was in hospital for a couple of weeks. I recovered amazingly well. Had a lot of memory difficulties to start with, and I was in my 3rd year of uni at that point. So I was still studying like mad and doing the best I could, but it was a real scare. I could have died. It made me realize that I didn't want to ever do anything, if I could help it, that would put me in a position like that again. So I started to do some research on, everyone was saying, these are the COVID cases, these are the numbers, everyone's dying of COVID. And I thought, well, that might be the case, but it just didn't sit well with me. And then I thought, well, what about these vaccines? They're so new. How safe are they? And that's when I started to do my research into the vaccines and the adverse events that were happening and the deaths that were occurring. But we hadn't seen much of that in Australia because we hadn't had the vaccine here for very long. So I did my research a lot through American websites and what was happening in the UK. All my family lives in the UK, apart from my parents. They live in South Africa. Got lots of friends all over Europe and America. So I think I've probably got a broader worldview of what's happening than most Australians would have. So I just did my research. And then in September, it was our school holidays here. We had a 2-week holiday. And a couple of days into those holidays, all of a sudden teachers were mandated to get the vaccine. And up until that point, we'd always been promised it would be voluntary. It would never, ever be mandated. Our Prime Minister assured us that that would never happen. And as soon as that was announced, and it was quite clever that they did it in the school holidays, knowing that teachers would be freaking out, I didn't know what to do. I was so upset because I thought, well, that's it. I know I'm not taking this vaccine, which means I know I'm not going to be able to teach. So for those 2-week holidays, I really didn't sleep or eat. I was just so worried. And I thought, well, possibly I might be able to get a medical exemption. So I went to see my doctor. I went to see 2 doctors, and neither of them would permit that. The only way we can get a medical exemption in Australia is if we have anaphylaxis to the ingredients in the COVID jabs, or if we have a very negative reaction to the first dose. But I'm not taking the first dose.
Did other than those 2 particular reasons, did the two doctors you spoke to, did they actually give you, did they actually have a proper conversation with you, or was it just about it all?
No. So the first doctor I went to see, who he knows I very rarely go to the doctor, I presented to him 2 days after having a brain aneurysm because I thought I'd had a migraine because I'd never had a migraine before. So he knows I'm pretty resilient, and I don't go to him unless I literally am dying. And I went in with a folder of lots of information that I'd collected, and he spent 45 minutes talking to me about the reasons why I was so hesitant. And he actually agreed with everything that I was saying. He also agreed that it was very unethical, that these mandates shouldn't be occurring, but he still had to recommend that I take Pfizer.
Because he's gagged, basically.
He has to, yeah. It's, doctors are being struck off if they don't. So I went to see my old doctor, and I had 2 meetings with her. All of these meetings took at least 45 minutes to an hour. And I had lots of valid reasons that I spoke to her about as well, including the use of ivermectin, which she just told me it was misinformation. And I said to her, but why would 70,000 healthcare workers in New York refuse to take this jab if something's not, something's not right about it? That doesn't sit well with me. What are they seeing at the front line that we're perhaps not seeing yet in Australia because we haven't had the vaccine for long enough? And she just said it was all fake news. So I just said, okay, we'll just agree to differ, and I won't be taking it.
Well, they can say it's fake news all they want, but then the VAERS reports, the report is at TGA in Australia, and you've got the yellow card system here in the UK. They're not fake news.
No, and that was the data I was presenting as well.
Yeah, and they're only reporting between 1% and 10% of actual occurrences.
Exactly.
We know in America, obviously there's a court case going because they found that there was a secondary reporting system that actually reported there was another 45,000 deaths in the space of 3 days that wasn't being recorded on VAERS. So there's an actual federal lawsuit going in right now. I've had the attorney on my podcast to talk all about it, who's dealing with it all. And there's cases are now starting to get to the discovery phases in America, which is great. Because that's what we need here in the UK. We don't have that in our judiciary system. We don't have the discovery phase as such, because once it gets there, on the good side, let's call it, that we're on, the right side of history, all the evidence stacks up on the guilty parties, and they didn't have the scientific evidence to prove otherwise, because it's never been there. So it's a very, very dark place. And as you say, I mean, you did totally the right thing. I mean, so many people wouldn't have haven't even gone to the doctor to actually had a discussion with them to get their doctor's opinion on it, because most people here in the UK, they'll trust their GP over anybody. But the reality is GPs over here have been getting paid £12.58 for every single jab they give. So imagine how many they would do during the day. They're not interested in, they're not interested in seeing Sue with an ingrown toenail, because they don't get paid for that, and they get they get a £10 bonus if they for a secondary one. If they only get the first, they only get the £12.58. So it's
so corrupt.
Everything's just so incentivized and corrupt to those levels. And in Australia, obviously, the doctors, the nurses. Obviously, I had Carolyn on the other week from Queensland, explained it in black and white. That they've all been gagged and threatened with their livelihoods. I mean, if it was such an amazing cure for this, to eradicate this worldwide disease that's obviously clearly not making people drop dead in the street, then why would you need to force it, mandate it, threaten people with their careers over it, and strike people off? If that isn't enough to actually make you see this for what it is, and like you said, you asked the right questions there. 70,000 healthcare workers in New York refused it, and it's because they're seeing vaccine injured people come through their doors. And they are in Australia, I know, because I'm good friends with a Queensland nurse, a Brisbane nurse, and she's just been saying the place is full of jabs people and vaccine injuries. The same here in UK. I mean, unfortunately, this lady reached out to me about 3 weeks ago from a fairly local hospital and said that she's leaving. She can't take it anymore because they had 11 children come in with strokes in 2 weeks.
That is shocking. And that's what's happening. They're rolling it out here.
Yeah, exactly.
From here, it's 12 years. That's if you're 12, 13 and you want to play basketball at your local team, You're not allowed to unless you've been double vaxxed. I mean, from 12, my son's 16 and he can't do work experience because he's not double vaxxed. So I'm just praying that the mandates will be revoked here, because next year he's moving to trade school. And when he has to do his apprenticeship, all the construction workers are mandated. So he won't be allowed on job sites. He won't be able to do his apprenticeship unless he's had this double jab. And he's 16 and it's the highest risk category for heart issues.
Yeah,
we're seeing all the myocarditis and pericarditis and strokes, and it's just so scary. I just don't want him to get it. But at the moment, he can't even get into the cinema. He can't go out with his mates. It's just life here. You cannot do anything unless you're double vaxxed. All I can do is go to the supermarket and the chemist. That's it. But most people just bury their heads because they've got their freedom back. They can go out now with their special green tick. Yeah.
For now, until they didn't have to have the booster.
Yeah. Well, that's coming as well.
Because it's happening
here. I just wonder, will that wake people up? Or are they not going to use their freedoms?
Yeah, I think it is here because I think by the time the booster comes out in Australia, people are going to, unfortunately, probably be hit in the face with trauma within their families, because that's what's happening here. People are suddenly losing all these people and seeing all these people having heart attacks and people collapsing. And that's unfortunately what it's going to take for a lot of people. It's going to take that level of trauma for people to kind of wake up. And I know people here that's happened to have actually spoke to me and now see it for what it is, but it's taken those traumatic events, unfortunately.
At a personal level.
Yeah, and I do get it. So if you put yourself in that position where you've just gone, and millions of people have done it, right? They've gone and done what they think is the right thing. And I've said this all along, there's no kind of right or wrong in this. At the end of the day, you're just a normal human being who wants to survive, and we have survival instincts, right? They play off that. We know that the manipulation starts there. But we all go, everyone goes to work. Our motivation is money, because you need money to survive in a first world country, to have a mortgage or your rent, to pay for your car, to get to work, your bills, everything else like that. So the motivation is money. So if you take that ability to be able to earn those rights away, people will do what's necessary to still be able to have those and have those luxuries, have those freedoms. And that's exactly what they've done. They've and more so in Australia than they have here. I think I've always said that I think between UK and Australia is like a very large landmass with a much smaller population. So it's easier to push people to their limits. Whereas here in the UK, you've got nearly 70 million people on one island, who have got a deep history of patriotism and stuff like that. Whereas what we're seeing in Canada and Australia, fairly new countries, aren't they? So they don't have those deep line like patriotic roots that like we do here in the UK. So I think on a grand scale, with this try to bring stuff in, many more people will stand up and push back, which is what they don't want. So they're trying to box very clever here in the UK with what they're doing, slowly bringing things under the radar, whereas Australia's just gone full Nazi, haven't they? Like they've gone from like 0 to Nazi in about a month.
Like when I say to people, I've made a decision for myself because I've weighed up both sides. I say the amount of people that have died to COVID or with COVID or of COVID, who knows, in my age bracket, as a woman, there have been 12 people in the last 18 months. So in the 40 to 49 age bracket, women, 12 people have died to COVID. Whereas the vaccines, now I can't break that down into age or sex because that data isn't available, but overall in the last 9 months, we've had 650 vaccine deaths. We've only had 2,000 deaths to COVID in all of Australia in 18 months. And we've had 78,000 vax injuries that have been lodged with the TGA. So there's probably many more. But I'm weighing it up and I'm thinking, I'm in such a low group of dying from COVID. And if I do get COVID, I know that I'm 99.5% fully recovered. I will be fine. I take vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc every day. I'm otherwise healthy, no underlying issues. So I think I've actually made a sensible decision for my health. but I'm not allowed to do that. Or if I do it, I just lose all my freedoms. Can't work, can't go out, can't participate in society, socially ostracized. A lot of people just think I'm a nutter. You know, why wouldn't you just do what you're told? The government wouldn't lie to you. And I'm like, really? But it's very hard to get the message across because so many people here, I mean, we've got 93% of vaxxed people in Victoria, apparently. It's a massive number. I don't believe it because I happen to know 40 people who are not vaxxed, like personally. And when we go on these rallies, like the last rally on Saturday had 500,000 people, apparently.
You super spreaders, you.
Yeah, no. It's just, you know, the amount of fear. I did a survey with some of my friends yesterday, and I got 42 responses. And I asked everyone to tell me the reasons why they got the jab. And number one was if they got it because they were scared of getting COVID. Well, only 4 people got the jab for that reason out of 42. The next category was, I did it mostly to protect others. 23 people did it to protect others. But they don't actually know that it's not really protecting others because the new data is showing us that that's not the case. The third reason was, I did it to be able to participate in society, and 9 people chose that as their first option. And the last category was, I did it to keep my job, and 6 people chose that. So it's more just for interest, because I was interested to see how people were thinking at this point of the COVID journey. So I'm glad that the fear factor has come down, because originally, like this time last year, everyone was so scared that they were going to get COVID and die. And you see how much new information we have in a year. So I'm interested to see how much new information will we have in a year from now. You know, I think I'm going to be pretty pleased that I didn't take the jab.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
it's hard going now. Like,
well,
living in this is hard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I honestly believe this winter in UK is going to be extremely difficult for a lot of families. I think there's going to be serious trauma here. And I know that because obviously I get, like yourself, I go to all the rallies in London, and I'm speaking to police all the time now. And every police officer I speak to is like very aware of what's going on, because they liaise with obviously the paramedics as part of their shift work. The paramedics are all reporting that there's a huge increase in heart attacks, strokes, blood clots in young population. I spoke to a lady on the rally who works in a London hospital in the NHS, and she said what they're seeing is unbelievable. She said 400% increase in those areas of heart attack, strokes, and blood clots in people under 40. And I personally know 11 people have had a heart attack in the last like 5 months, right within days of having their second jab. 3 of them are in the military. So, you know, like that was never a thing, nor were strokes in children. And again, this is what, unfortunately, these injuries are what it's going to take for the penny to drop. I don't know if anybody saw yesterday, but there was they were trying to get a gathering outside the main hospital in Vancouver because they had 13 stillbirths in 24 hours. All the parents jabbed, and it's been proper enforcement. And they're trying to hear in the UK. It's absolutely disgusting. The people in the team I work with, the legal representatives, are actually drawing up documentation now to actually serve all these midwives and these midwife establishments, because they're really pushing on pregnant people. It's absolutely disgusting. And there's so many cases in America where of stillbirths, but also the mother's dying, and also obviously the baby being born with serious conditions, or then getting serious conditions from breastfeeding from vaccinated mothers is actually a really serious issue. And when I did a podcast with Dr. Peter McCulloch, you know, fascinating man. He's so well versed to what's going on. The guy's written so many papers, probably one of the most qualified people in the world to comment on early treatment for COVID and, you know, and conditions and injuries. And he was saying that the CDC and the FDA have actually categorized pregnant women as category X, which means at no point should they be vaccinated. But yet in the UK and Australia and Canada, Ireland, Germany, Austria, places like that, they're literally ramming it down people's throats, these midwives. It's disgusting. But the reality is, and I know full well it's going to happen, is that there's going to be arrests very soon at that level here in the UK. So I, along with another colleague, the nurses in a local suburb have all started refusing to give the jab now because they are actually worried about going to jail.
Good.
And that's what needs to start happening. Like the people that they aim, they might think they're doing the right thing at the time, but we totally get that. And the whole purpose of these legal entities is to actually show people, like, this is what could happen to you if someone was to succumb to harm or death. We don't want that. We want to avoid that. Kids, for example, Robert Malone, who invented mRNA technology, Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Richard Fleming, Jane Ruby, all these experts I've had on my show have all categorically said, like, and at no point should children be vaccinated with these jabs, because the risk of them getting myocarditis or serious adverse reactions totally outweighs the risk of them even getting COVID, let alone being hospitalized from it. And we're seeing that right now. There was 0 children with no underlying comorbidities had died from COVID. But now we've got several children that have died from the vaccine.
They're trying to roll it out here. That's the next agenda.
I mean, we know in New South Wales there was deaths in children. They've tried their best to cover it up and gag the parents, when they got all those children to go to the football stadium. And we're almost giving college university scholarships out, like, as a prize, like, for 10 lucky people, like it was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Like, when did you ever think that would happen in our lifetimes? But just going back to the obviously from where you are in Victoria, it was a beautiful sight to see so many people out on Saturday, and I know you guys are all out again this Saturday from what I've seen. It's beautiful to see. And just for the benefit of the people listening who've maybe never been to a rally, like, describe the vibe.
Okay, well, I'd never been to a rally until 2 weeks ago. When the protests started here, they were being done initially during our lockdown, so they were illegal protests, and there was a lot of police brutality during those.
I saw it was terrible.
And I certainly didn't want to go to something like that because that's quite scary.
Were you worried for the police's safety, were you?
Pardon?
Were you worried for the police's safety if you turned up?
So once lockdowns finished, I started to go to the protests with my husband and a couple of friends as well. And the first one that I went to was 2 weeks ago, and it was about 100,000 people at that one. And it was so inspirational. It was just so nice to be a part of history. I know that I'm doing my bit to fight for my children's freedom in the future. And I just couldn't sit back and do nothing anymore. It's just, I have to do something. If we need to have feet on the ground for them to visibly see how many people are pissed off by this, then that's what we need to do. And then we went again on Saturday, and it was 5 times the size. I mean, when you consider that Victoria, my state, only has 6.5 million people, and there were 500,000 people there, it was great to have vaccinated people, unvaccinated people, everybody wanting to get rid of these mandates, to stop the really dangerous laws that are trying to be passed in Victoria, where our Premier will basically have complete control, and he'll be able to pass lockdowns. He'll be able to do anything, even once we're not in a pandemic and once our state of emergency ends. So he's had way too much power, and we don't want him to be able to have even more. So that's why we've been protesting. And it's great. It's really good. It makes you feel like you're doing something, you're part of something bigger, and hopefully it will make a change, and I can, feel proud that I've done that, even though some people think that, oh, you're such a rebel. Why would you do that? So dangerous. You're spreading COVID. Like, well, we're outside, so we don't have to wear masks anymore.
Zero transmission.
So But people don't know this. They are so ignorant.
Zero asymptomatic spread as well. Asymptomatic spread
Yeah.
just does not exist in COVID.
And there's more and more information coming out. I read articles in the British Medical Journal, the Lancet, Cochrane reviews. I'm really researching whatever I can for what others will view as very valid research. And so many people just don't want to know. They're like, oh, well, I'm fed up. I'm sick of it. I just want my life back. And I get that. Like, people are exhausted. We've had so many lockdowns here, and people just want their lives back. But yeah. I don't see it as that being that simple or straightforward.
It's not at all. People generally need to understand, and I'll outright say this on this podcast: we are at war. Like 100%, we are at war. Now, when people say that, you think bombs and bullets. It's not a case of bombs and bullets. There is no bombs and bullets yet. Okay, it's a psychological and spiritual warfare that's been waged on the people by their own governments. That's exactly what's happening. There's a lot going on in the background as well, from a sort of military perspectives. There's arrests happening, but in terms of like the general populace in these countries, it is absolutely a war on the people. And when people actually understand that, it will 100% open up your eyes a lot more. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, can you?
Yeah. That's it. I really feel like ignorance is bliss. And sometimes I wish I was totally ignorant, because the more I learn, and who's controlling all this, and, just follow the money, big pharma, they control everything. Like, people think, why would the media lie to us? Why would the government not, why can't we trust them? I'm like, it's too much to explain it in one conversation. You have to do a lot of research to understand what's going on behind the scenes and the whole world picture.
Yeah. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's the same people who say, the government is just trying to do the best by the people. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just spreading dangerous misinformation and stuff like that. What they didn't actually realize is people like yourself, myself, millions of other people around the world aren't doing this because it's like a big giant game of I told you so. We're doing it for our own lives, our own children, but also their children, and for them, the very people that are saying that you're misinformed, you're talking crap, and stuff like that. Everybody who's standing up toe to toe with this evil is doing it for them as well, and that's what they need to understand. Everything that we're doing is, that turnout in Melbourne. I was at London at the weekend. Is all through like love, compassion, and empathy.
Absolutely.
And standing up to this evil, satanic craziness like that is going on in this world right now, and this new world order that they're trying to like install. It's absolutely mental, and as we said a million times, because these individuals don't actually see it within their own lives. They, like in UK, we've been pretty much opened up since July. It's obvious what's happening because all the people I work with spend day in, day out researching and following, putting all the plans together, joining the dots. So you can see what they're trying to plan here, but it will involve trying to put people into a lockdown, and everyone's had 6 months worth of freedoms by then. And what they're going to do? Well, if you want those freedoms back, you've got to do X, Y, and Z, which involves an app on your phone, and stuff like that, because they've already brought it in Scotland, Wales, and recently Northern Ireland. But not only that, they're now saying you've got to be fully vaccinated to be able to go to places, which means having a booster. Or it's not even a booster, it's a third jab of the same thing. You're just topping up graphene oxide in your body and hydrogel. That's all you're doing in essence. So
and you're destroying your own immune system. That's why people are getting sick.
I know. Do you think the tide will turn? Do you think it's going to take a few more sort of protests? Obviously it isn't an endless battle, isn't it, with conversations? I have conversations daily with people who wanted to learn more, which I don't mind, because it's helping them. Over the next few months, I'm going to be doing a lot of talks, so I'm going to be doing quite a bit of traveling. So it's going to be it's going to be one to many, whereas many people are going to be coming who are asking more questions now and want to learn more and actually understand. Do you know what? I can actually see that there's something not right here.
Yeah,
You
a
know,
lot of people are saying that to me. They can see something's not right.
yeah.
A few are asking more questions.
Mm,
It's definitely not the fear that they had this time last year.
mm,
But because our population is so much smaller, you know, a lot of people don't even know anyone who's had COVID. They
exactly.
don't
Yeah.
know anyone who's had an adverse reaction to the vaccine.
Mm,
You know, so until it becomes more prominent and we're actually seeing and they're reporting on the vaccine injuries and what's happening, you know, in teenage boys in particular, there's just so much not reported on anymore.
mm,
You know, every day in our news, we have COVID numbers and COVID deaths every single day. And it's, you know, you read the comments that people put on these news posts, a lot of them are being deleted now because there is a lot of opposition to like stop telling your lies, mainstream media, you know, wake up, report on the injuries. People are making these comments, but they're being deleted.
and then replaced with bots, messages from bots,
Yeah.
because we've seen the bot farms that they have, you know, on Twitter and things like that. Like Boris Johnson will write, or it won't be him, but like obviously
Yeah.
his media team will put a post out from him on Twitter, and then you see about 50 replies of the exact same text, like
The
as you go
same.
with them,
Yeah.
from all different people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exactly what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and again, why would they do that? Why would they need to do it? Why do they need to go through
Yeah.
that effort to back it all up? Like, you know,
Yeah. It's just mass brainwashing. They're just trying to get everyone to think a certain way.
and
And
what
they don't
people don't
like us that
realize,
don't.
what a lot of people don't actually realize as well, is that people like in the UK, we've got like the SAGE groups, so the science advisory people, but who are made up of a lot of psychologists, not like full-time scientists. But what they've obviously then employed, the Nudge Association, the Nudge Group, which are a big group of behavioural scientists, which have actually studied the British population for years leading up to this. So everything from like how people operate in general, what their likes are, what their dislikes, what gets them,
Yeah.
you know, what really gets people sort of external validation, what's making people happy, what do people really like in life, all the trends, everything, just collating all this data, and then use that data to against you, to manipulate the masses. And that's exactly what happens. And if anybody likes to read books, and that, I definitely recommend reading Laura Dodsworth's State of Fear. Absolutely fantastic book, and it's how governments have weaponized fear during COVID-19 on the people. I've got a psychologist coming on soon who's basically studied the whole thing, and we're going to break down from like early last year all the points and the prominent things where the government have actually gone, they brought this in, but they told you that you needed to do it because of XYZ, and then you were told to do this because of this, and then, you know, and so on, all the way towards where we are now in present date. So I'm hoping that kind of episode will help people really go, oh shit.
Yeah. I fell for it.
Yeah. But I think as well, you know, and there's millions of people here in the UK who obviously, most of my family have, you know, been double vaccinated, and many are asking questions now. Obviously, many of them, you know, they've actually started watching some of my podcasts. And I know my old man, he'll be watching. He's watched pretty much all of them. Like, bless his heart. Happy birthday for tomorrow, Dad. And yeah, again, it's helping them join in the dots, and I think that's what it's all about. So doing podcasts like we're doing now with people like yourself, teachers, people who are actually in the thick of it, who are being taken away from their dream job, you know, being made to sit teaching kids at home for something that's literally produced hardly any cases at all. And we know that the tool that's being used to diagnose these cases is completely faulty, and is being pulled by the CDC on the 31st of December. But you know, that tells you everything you need to know. The guy who invented it said it's not supposed to be used as a diagnostic tool, but you know, somebody who's not even a qualified person can diagnose you and tell you you've got COVID because it says so on a test which consistently gives false positives because of how they test them. You know, just
talking of testing, about 2 weeks ago, they changed the way that children could return to school if they'd been in contact with someone who had COVID. Initially, school children would have to have 2 weeks off school and then they could come back. But because schools are just, having lots and lots of cases now, they're saying that children can stay off school for 7 days, have the test on day 6, and then return to school on day 8. And from day 8 to 15, they can do rapid antigen testing at school so that they can, ensure that they're COVID free. So I asked my principal if that was an option for the children, unvaxxed kids. I said I'd be quite happy to do that every single day at my own expense, if that would give you, the security of knowing that I am COVID free and able to teach. And it's just not allowed. Okay, so it's okay for the kids to do it, but this isn't about safety. This is like punishment and control.
Yeah.
I haven't done what the government wants me to do.
Mm.
So, you're not teaching, even though there are other methods that are acceptable for one part of the population. And whether they work or not, I don't know. But if it's an option for the kids, I don't know why it couldn't be an option for unvaxxed teachers, because we've lost 1,200 teachers in Victoria. That's how many have refused to get the vaccine. So we have a massive teacher shortage. And there's not enough casual relief teachers to cover all the teachers that are off at the moment. We've all had to take, either if you had long service leave, you could take that. That's not an option for me because I'm too new. So I'm on leave without pay. And they need to keep my job open apparently until the end of first term next year. So our schools break up here on the 17th of December. But I don't know if I'm able to go back and teach next year or not. Because unless these mandates are revoked, I won't be able to. But I can't even set foot on site to collect my belongings or do anything.
That's just like literally blows my mind.
Yeah.
How
and what a nightmare they're making for themselves, losing all these qualified teachers, nurses. There's we have such a shortage of people in these jobs that they're getting migrant workers in from overseas to fill the gaps. It's like, but you have a workforce here, and we can do other safety issues if that's a concern.
Do these migrant workers need to be vaccinated?
Yes, they do.
They do?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But no quarantine. They can come straight in now. But we can't fly in between states without doing quarantine. But you can come in from overseas.
So if you want to go to visit some family in Queensland,
well, you have to be double vaxxed.
So you have to be double vaxxed.
You have to do a 2-week quarantine as well.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wait.
So it's not normal. There's no returning to normal.
Should we both just bang our heads off the wall now on this podcast?
I know.
It blows my mind.
The rules that they've had in place here, they've now just said that children from year 7 and above don't need to wear masks in school anymore. But if you're in grade 3 to 6, you need to wear a mask. Because COVID knows if you're in grade 6 or 7.
Yeah. So that is child abuse. It is actual child abuse.
It's awful.
There's 130 years of evidence. Like I think it's almost 60 studies that have been done that are recent on masks and how bad they are for you. Okay, we know that the particles of the viral particles from any human being are so small anything will get through these masks. Anything. It's like chucking. I had a good analogy. It's like chucking a handful of mosquitoes at a chain link fence. That's literally what it is. The same. They do absolutely nothing.
And they're still compulsory here. We've only been allowed to stop wearing them outside like 3 or 4 weeks ago. Up until that, if we were taking the dog for a walk, we still had to wear a mask. They're still mandatory in all indoor settings. So you go to the shops or you're out for the day.
What about exemptions? Do you have exemptions for masks?
Yes, you can get them, but I've only ever seen a couple of people with them. I'm sure they're as hard to get as the medical exemptions for the jab.
So would you have to get a doctor's sign it off to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the UK, the doctors didn't do any of that. They wouldn't do it. So you literally, this is how pathetic it is. You could literally download a PDF onto your phone that says I'm medically exempt from wearing masks, and you could just show it, and they go, okay.
Wow.
Like literally, I haven't worn one, right? So I just like, when the masks were mandated, and they'd ask you, but then to be honest, I didn't even get challenged that much. Like, so it wasn't too bad. But I always found that I think it depends on like who you are, if you know what I mean. So, and again, it's just that behavioral science thing. So I didn't get challenged that much, but like a small female who was maybe a few people back would get challenged.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And it's just like, again, it's pathetic. But if I did get challenged, I go, yeah, I'm just going to show you this PDF from my phone, mate, that I've just downloaded myself without putting any of my details in. Okay, yeah, go in.
I know. Yeah, there's so little common sense to the whole way everything's been handled with COVID, and the rules over here change, weekly. It's hard to keep up to date with what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed
It's the
to do.
same here in the UK, isn't it? So, I mean, obviously you've got like multiple states in Australia. We've got England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, but like all the rules have always been different. Like we live on the same island, well, obviously apart from Northern Ireland, but the other countries, England, Scotland, Wales, we're on the same island, yet like, and every school has different rules. So like, if it was that bad, if it was that serious, it would be blanket. This is what needs to be done everywhere to protect everybody, and everyone would probably have bought into that. But because it's so disjointed, like all these people don't know their arse from their elbow. All these people at the top in all these major sectors are getting paid a lot of good money to put up, shut up, stand aside. Including head teachers. Where now you've got third-party companies coming into all the schools and that doing the vaccination of kids. It's just so blatantly obvious to see how corrupt it all is. And again, it's the classic follow the money, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's so frustrating. Just don't know when it's going to end. It's living in this constant state of not knowing. I'm a very organized person and I like to have things planned. So at the moment, I'm studying again because it's literally the only thing I can do. So I'm studying online. I'm doing a diploma in child and teen mental health to keep myself busy. And it's a really good addition to teaching. And it's so needed. It's so needed. Like that's been a massive factor during all these lockdowns, children's well-being. So I thought, well, at least that's going to keep me mentally stimulated and keep me going, for a while. And whenever I get back to teaching, I'll just have more to offer.
Beautiful. And you know what? That's such a proactive mindset. And prime example of how your school is missing out on such an amazing asset like yourself. Like right there, you've just explained it, like how much you love your job, your profession, the kids, their welfare. You're taking all these steps to just constantly, improve your own personal development in those areas. You're doing all that stuff, which no doubt is kind of missing in a lot of schools, some places. A lot of people just like to turn up and do a 9-to-5 job and get paid, don't they? So you've got people like yourself that, actively wanting to be the best they can be so they can give the best, you can give the best you to your students, and you're being forced out of your job because of a vaccination, which isn't a vaccine, from a gene therapy, which does not stop you from transmitting it, does not stop you from getting it. And like, it doesn't do what it says on the tin.
Exactly.
And if you think back to 6-7 months ago, maybe longer than that, people were told you you only needed one vaccine to get out of this mess.
How things change.
And now they're looking at the third here in England. They're already on their fourth in Israel. It's going to become a prescription.
It's just going to keep going. And you're not going to keep your green tick unless you're up to date with all your vaccines.
Absolutely barking mad. On that note, obviously you just said you've done a lot of research yourself, and you spent a lot of time doing it. So I think it'd be probably a good idea to maybe share with people who in education and other settings, where if somebody was fairly new to doing a bit of research, as they're starting to see that something isn't right, what would you suggest they do? Because it is a minefield.
It is.
I've spent best part of over a year, and obviously I work surrounded by experts, and even every day I'm constantly like on it, like, and people don't have the ability to do that, like they just don't.
Yeah.
You know, so I've got a quite unique position. But if somebody's just starting out, where would you suggest they
Well, the place that I started was a friend told me about Telegram, which I hadn't heard of before that point. So I found a national education group on that. So that was quite specific. That was mostly teachers in New South Wales and Victoria, but I'm sure there's like groups, you know, all over the world. So if you search on those platforms, you're going to get a whole lot of information that is related to maybe your industry, or that, I know there's so many different groups on there. Only go for a few, don't go for too many, because it's so overwhelming, the amount of information. And I put myself on timeouts, like I don't let myself be on it all day long, because it's just makes me feel a bit crazy. So I think with all social media, set your own boundaries. And then I go off and do my own independent research, and I just look for, you know, as I was saying, like British Medical Journal, the Lancet, those kind of peer-reviewed information, because I know not everything has been reported in those publications, but I know if I can find anything in there, that's the type of information that is held very, it's reputable. So if I'm sharing information with others, I can say, oh, well, I don't want to say so-and-so on TikTok said this, because people don't rate that. You know, that's not a reputable source, even though the information might be accurate. So I just try and find a mixture of anecdotal evidence, just talking to people, you know, really friendly and openly, not aggressively, not the whole, you know, a lot of people call us anti-vaxxers over here, and it's a really derogatory term.
Yeah, same here, yeah.
Like, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've had all my childhood vaccines. I'm just curious, and I'm asking questions. And when I go to the rallies, my sign says, teacher, I say no to bullying and coercion, and I ask questions. And that sign gets a lot of respect, because people are thinking, oh, what kind of questions are you asking? You know, I'm like, well, use critical thinking, especially teachers. Do some critical thinking. You know, there's always two sides to every story. And I like research. So, you know, I do spend a fair amount of time doing it. And the more stuff that I find, it just makes me feel like I have hope that eventually this information will come out, you know, into the mainstream, and more people will get to see it. And I share snippets of it with close family and friends who have expressed an interest in understanding more. Not the really big stuff, you know, I break them in slowly, with stuff that's easier to understand when you're just starting out on this journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's the best way, because the worst thing you could do is just flood people with like a ton of information from loads of different sources. And to be fair, that's like the kind of same principles I've had with my own personal development journey. I've only ever really stuck to sort of like paying attention to a few key influencers, you know, who have become very successful, and actually learn from them and how they've done what they've done and how they've got to where they got to, rather than listening to like 25 podcasts. And for anyone listening, you know, you all know that there's only one podcast you need to listen to. That's obviously the AJ Roberts Show. Don't know there's Joe Rogan thinks he is. Although I have sent him an invite to come on the show. So you know, I'm manifesting it. So it will be sat on the other side of the screen in the not too distant future. But no, you're absolutely right. You know, and I think your moral compass, your ethos, and the way you're doing everything is absolutely superb, and you should be really, really proud of that. Standing up for, you know, your rights, and everything you're doing is on behalf of the future of our generations. And that's what people again seem to forget. These children need protecting. You know, these poor kids are being forced to wear masks at school. The mental health problems that it's going to give them, you know, all that like learning and motor skills that they're missing out on and being eradicated again. It's just, you know, it's such harmful things. It's so important that everything that we do now is on behalf of them, because this is what it's all about. It's all about these kids, and also our amazing elderly people who actually got our countries to where they are now. You know, people are very quick to forget about them. These are the people who are being seriously brainwashed, you know, especially here in the UK where they've been brought up watching the BBC. And you still see them walking around town all the time with like rubber gloves on and like masks and stuff, you know. It's terrible. But like you said, one day, and I think it will be soon, people will start realizing the sheer atrocities that have actually gone on here in terms of psychological and spiritual warfare on the people. Yeah, and I think it will be very, very soon. But honestly, Jane, from me, and I know from everybody listening, you know, you've done a fantastic job. Keep doing what you're doing. You know, in the manner that you're doing it, it's absolutely beautiful to see. And I genuinely hope, and I'm sure everybody else does, that you'll be back in the classroom doing what you love, teaching all these amazing children, and making brighter futures for everybody.
Thanks, AJ. Me too. I can't wait to be back with my students. I miss them so much. And yeah, hopefully it won't be too long before I'll be back with them. Thank you so much.
No worries. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Jane from over in Victoria in Australia, obviously explaining to all of us what's been going on there, and the sheer pain that the people like Jane have been going through in the education sector and the health sector, through harsh lockdowns, through these mandates. It needs to come to an end. You know, this is not about helping the people. This is not about health. This is all about corruption and control. It needs to be brought to a head at the earliest opportunity. Please do look out for upcoming episodes in the not too distant future. We've got Dr. Ryan Cole, as many of you will know, coming onto the show. I've got some Navy SEAL operators coming onto the show as well, which is going to be pretty cool to speak to them and what it's been like for the military over in the United States. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank you all so much for the amazing support that you've given to the show over the last few weeks and months, especially. It's grown exponentially, and it's been beautiful to see. As I said, I'm focusing on a bit of a mix between Australia and here in the UK, because the beautiful people in Australia need a lot of attention and need a lot of help from the outside. You know, the world needs to know what's happening there, because it's only going to, I guess, wake everybody up here in the UK, Europe, and North America to what's going on, to give us more of a better perception of things that could potentially be happening. Please make sure you go to my website, guys, mrajroberts.com/community, where you'll find loads of legal documents that you can use and which can be used in Australia as well. So notice of liabilities for vaccination on schools to employers, doctors and nurses, articles that have been written by doctors and scientists I'm posting up there. Plus also I've made a little space for those of you in small business who sell products and that, because I'm really trying to encourage people to buy from a small business this Christmas for their loved ones, not from Amazon, not from major retailers who are massively profiting from all of this chaos that we find ourselves in. Let's get around small businesses, because they're the ones that are being, you know, squashed in all of this. And they have, you know, those amazing people who started them have businesses that obviously to run, families to feed. So let's help them out this Christmas. So please, if you've got a business, chuck your website and your details up there as well. And you'll also find the new AJ Roberts t-shirt, Stronger Together. Okay, it's currently in khaki green, obviously from a military background. So please do check that out on the website as well. You can order straight from there, and it will be delivered straight to your door. From myself and from Jane, take care, and I'll see you next time on the AJ Roberts Show. Take care, guys.